The second my sister smashed that cake into my face, the room exploded with laughter, like my humiliation was the entertainment everyone had been waiting for. Frosting filled my mouth, my nose, my eyes, and for a split second I tasted sugar before pain took over. A sharp crack shot through my head, so sudden it stole my breath. I laughed because everyone expected me to. I wiped icing off my lashes and pretended it was funny. 3 hours later, an ER doctor stared at my X-ray, went completely silent, and picked up the phone to call 911. My sister Vanessa has always believed that attention belongs to her by default. Growing up, she didn't ask for the spotlight, she assumed it was already shining and the rest of us were simply standing in it. Birthdays became competitions. Holidays became performances. Even tragedies somehow bent themselves around her emotions. So when my parents announced they were hosting her engagement party at their house, I already knew exactly how the night would go. What I didn't know was how badly it would end. I didn't want to attend. I had spent the entire day fighting a dull headache that pressed behind my eyes like a tightening band. Light bothered me. Noise felt sharper than usual. But my mom insisted, telling me that family obligations weren't optional and that Vanessa would be devastated if I didn't show. That word, devastated, always seemed reserved for her. I agreed to come, already exhausted before I even left my apartment. The house looked like something straight out of a magazine. White string lights lined the backyard fence. Gold balloons spelled out engaged. There was catered food, a rented sound system, and a 3-tier cake placed proudly at the center of the patio table. My mom mentioned, more than once, how expensive the cake had been. I remember thinking it cost more than I spent on groceries in an entire month. Vanessa floated through the party like royalty, laughing too loudly, flipping her hair so people would notice her ring, retelling the proposal story again and again with dramatic pauses. Every time she passed me, she gave me that look, the one that always meant she was calculating something. I tried to ignore it. I stayed in the background, helped refill drinks, and avoided the cameras as much as possible. My headache got worse as the evening went on. I mentioned it quietly to my mom while helping her in the kitchen. She waved me off immediately. She said Vanessa had waited her whole life for this moment and I wasn't going to dampen the mood by complaining. She told me to drink water and stop being sensitive. I swallowed a painkiller and reminded myself that once cake was served, I could leave. Dinner passed without incident, but the noise felt overwhelming. Conversations blurred together. Laughter felt too loud. When someone clinked a glass to get attention, the sound made my vision blur for a second. I leaned against the counter until it passed. Then it was time for cake. Everyone gathered around the table, phones raised, waiting for Vanessa to cut the first slice. She posed with the knife, smiling for photos, soaking in the attention. I stood slightly off to the side, already planning my quiet exit. That's when she turned toward me. I barely had time to register her movement before she scooped a massive chunk of cake with her hand and shoved it straight into my face. Frosting exploded everywhere. It covered my eyes, filled my nose, smeared across my mouth. Someone gasped. Then the laughter started. Loud. Uncontrolled. Phones flashed as people rushed to capture the moment. My mom laughed the hardest of all. My head snapped back from the force. A sharp, blinding pain cracked through my skull, so intense my knees buckled. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was standing or falling. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep myself upright. Vanessa bowed dramatically, like she had just delivered the punchline of the century. "Relax, Bianca," she said. "It's just cake." I forced a laugh because everyone was watching. Because I had spent my entire life learning how to make things easier for her. I wiped frosting from my eyes, smiled, and excused myself to the bathroom. The second I locked the door, my smile disappeared. My reflection looked wrecked. Cake was tangled in my hair, smeared down my dress, clinging to my eyelashes. But what scared me wasn't how I looked. It was the way my head throbbed. The pain wasn't fading. It was deep, pulsing, and sharp in a way that made my stomach churn. I cleaned myself up as best I could and returned to the party because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of ruining my night. I kept my head down, avoided conversation, and counted the minutes until I could leave. When I finally said goodbye, Vanessa hugged me tightly and whispered, "Lighten up," as if I had somehow offended her by being hurt. I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, my head pounding with every heartbeat, convincing myself that sleep would fix everything. It didn't. Sleep never came that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my head pulsed harder, like something inside was swelling and pushing outward. Around 3 a.m, nausea hit me so fast I barely made it to the bathroom. I dry heaved until my throat burned, my vision swimming even after I lay back down. The room felt tilted, like the floor wasn't level anymore. By morning, the pain had sharpened. Light felt aggressive. Sound made my skull ache. When I tried to stand, my legs wobbled, forcing me to grab the edge of the bed. I called my mom, hoping for reassurance, maybe even concern. Instead, she sighed and told me I was probably dehydrated or hungover. I reminded her I hadn't been drinking. She said I was overthinking it and suggested rest. I tried to follow her advice. I really did. I attempted to answer emails, but the glow from my laptop made my eyes burn. My phone buzzed non-stop with notifications. Relatives had started sharing videos of the cake incident, laughing emojis layered over clips of frosting exploding across my face. No one asked if I was okay. Not one message said, "Are you hurt?" Around noon, I stood up too quickly and felt the world spin violently. My heart raced. My ears rang. I collapsed onto the couch, gasping, my head screaming in protest. That was the moment denial finally cracked. Something was wrong. At the emergency room, the air smelled like antiseptic and fatigue. I explained what happened to the triage nurse, mentioning the cake almost apologetically. Her expression shifted when she noticed how sensitive I was to the overhead lights and how unsteady I seemed on my feet. She took my vitals and ushered me back far faster than I expected. The doctor asked question after question. Had I lost consciousness? Was there vomiting? Neck pain? I told him everything. He nodded slowly and ordered a CT scan, explaining it was precautionary. As I lay on the cold table, the machine humming around me, fear crept in. This was no longer embarrassing. It was real. When he returned, his tone had changed. He said they needed additional imaging, specifically an X-ray of my neck. My stomach dropped. No one mentioned just in case anymore. They mentioned concern. The X-ray process was slow and careful. The technician adjusted my head gently, telling me not to move. Her voice was calm, but her eyes lingered on the screen longer than comfort allowed. When it was finished, I was wheeled back into the room and told to wait. Minutes dragged. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa had posted the cake video publicly. The caption read, "When your sister can't take a joke, face with tears of joy." Hundreds of likes. Comments cheering her on. I stared at the screen, stunned by how easily my pain had become entertainment. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to cry in that hospital bed. Then the door opened. The doctor walked in with 2 nurses behind him. He didn't sit. He looked at the monitor, then directly at me. "Bianca," he said, carefully, "I need you to stay very still." He explained that the X-ray showed abnormal swelling near my cervical spine. There was evidence suggesting a hairline fracture. His voice remained calm, but his words hit like ice water. He said I needed immediate transfer to a trauma center. He said he was calling 911. Hearing that number made my chest tighten. Ambulances were for real emergencies. For accidents. For people whose lives were actually in danger. The nurses fitted a neck brace around me, stabilizing my head. One of them squeezed my hand and told me I'd done the right thing by coming in. As the doctor stepped outside to make the call, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the party in my mind. The laughter. The phones. The cake. If I had gone to sleep and ignored it, I might not have woken up the same way. Or at all. Paramedics arrived quickly, their movements efficient and practiced. As they transferred me onto the gurney, one of them asked what happened. When I told him, he shook his head slowly. "That could have ended a lot worse," he said quietly. As they rolled me toward the ambulance, I realized something terrifying and freeing at the same time. This wasn't my fault. The ambulance ride felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold through a narrow window. Sirens wailed above me, flashing red and blue across the ceiling. Every bump in the road sent a ripple of pain through my neck, reminding me how fragile I suddenly was. One of the paramedics kept talking to me, asking simple questions to make sure I stayed alert. I answered automatically, my mind stuck replaying Vanessa's laugh over and over again. At the trauma center, a team was already waiting. I was rushed through corridors, transferred onto another bed, surrounded by voices that spoke in quick, clipped medical language. More scans followed. More machines. More waiting. When the doctor finally came in, he closed the door behind him before speaking. He explained that the imaging confirmed a hairline fracture in my cervical spine, along with significant soft tissue damage. He told me I was lucky. Another inch, another angle, and the outcome could have been catastrophic. Permanent nerve damage. Paralysis. Even death. The words landed heavily in the room. I lay there, staring at him, trying to reconcile how a joke had nearly ended my life. He explained the recovery process, the brace, the monitoring. He stressed that I should not have moved my head after the injury. My stomach twisted as I thought about driving myself home, about sleeping without knowing. An hour later, my mom and Vanessa arrived. My mom rushed to my bedside, finally looking shaken. Vanessa, however, stood near the door with her arms crossed. She looked irritated, not scared. "This is getting blown way out of proportion," she said, glancing at the brace around my neck. The doctor turned toward her immediately. His tone was firm, professional, and unyielding. He explained the injury again, slower this time, detailing the risks. Vanessa's face drained of color. She didn't apologize. She didn't step closer. She just went quiet. As they stepped outside to talk, I heard Vanessa mutter, "She always makes everything about her." Something inside me finally broke, not physically, but emotionally. The excuses I had made for her over the years dissolved in that moment. I realized she wasn't careless. She was cruel. I stayed in the hospital for several days. I was monitored closely, immobilized, forced into stillness that gave me too much time to think. Friends visited, shocked when they saw the brace. They couldn't believe how serious it was. Some cried. Some apologized for laughing at the video. Vanessa didn't visit again. While lying in that bed, I made a decision I should have made years earlier. I posted a photo online, not dramatic, not angry. Just me, in the hospital, wearing a neck brace. The caption was simple, "This is what just a joke did." The response was immediate. Messages flooded in. The tone shifted completely. The same people who had laughed were suddenly horrified. The video disappeared within hours. Vanessa called me that night, furious. She accused me of embarrassing her, of ruining her engagement, of making her look like a monster. I told her she had done that herself. She hung up. Recovery was slow and frustrating. Physical therapy hurt. Wearing the brace made everything difficult. My parents visited less frequently as the weeks passed, clearly uncomfortable with the reality of my injury. Vanessa never apologized. Instead, she complained that people were treating her differently. Months later, a wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Vanessa's name was written in elegant script. I stared at it for a long time before throwing it away. For the first time, I chose my safety over keeping the peace. Healing forced me to slow down in ways I never had before. Every movement required intention. Every step reminded me that my body had limits, even if my family had never respected them. Physical therapy became my routine, measured progress replacing the rush of normal life. Some days I improved. Other days I felt stuck, frustrated by how easily one careless moment had reshaped my future. But the physical pain wasn't the hardest part. What weighed on me most was the clarity. Distance has a way of sharpening memories. Lying still for hours at a time, I replayed my entire relationship with Vanessa, not just the party. The patterns became impossible to ignore. The jokes that always targeted me. The way laughter followed my discomfort. The way my parents excused her behavior by calling it personality, humor, confidence. I had mistaken endurance for love for far too long. When people reached out to apologize, some meant it. Others just wanted relief from guilt. I accepted what felt genuine and let the rest go. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean access. It doesn't require reopening doors that were closed for safety. That lesson was harder for my family than it was for me. My mom accused me of creating distance. She said families tease each other and that I was turning an accident into a permanent divide. I reminded her that accidents come with apologies, accountability, care. Silence isn't love, and minimizing harm isn't normal. Vanessa never apologized. Instead, she told relatives I was exaggerating, that doctors were dramatic, that people online had misunderstood. She framed herself as the victim of overreaction. When I heard that, something unexpected happened. I stopped feeling angry. Anger had kept me tied to her for years. It kept me engaged, reactive, waiting for acknowledgement. Letting go felt quieter, stronger. I blocked her number and stopped explaining myself. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. I went back to work. I drove again. I slept without pain waking me every hour. The brace came off. Scars faded. But the shift inside me stayed. I stopped attending events where I felt like a prop. I left conversations where my experiences were dismissed. I learned to trust my instincts, especially when they told me something wasn't safe. I learned that boundaries don't require consensus. They require clarity. Sometimes people ask if I regret sharing what happened publicly. I don't. Silence would have protected the wrong person. Telling the truth didn't make me cruel. It made me honest. The strangest part is how close I came to ignoring everything. If I had laughed it off, if I had gone to sleep and trusted everyone else's comfort over my own fear, I might not be here telling this story. That thought still sends a chill through me. I used to believe strength meant enduring whatever family handed me. Now I know strength is choosing yourself when others refuse to. And I know this with certainty, pain doesn't become smaller just because others find it funny. What stayed with me long after the bruises faded wasn't just the injury, it was the realization of how easily my pain had been dismissed. I kept replaying that moment in my head, not just the cake hitting my face, but the laughter that followed. The way people assumed that if something looked funny, it couldn't be harmful. I learned the hard way that humiliation and danger can wear the same disguise, especially when they come from people who are supposed to care about you. For years, I had been trained to doubt myself. To smile when something hurt. To stay quiet when a line was crossed. That night didn't just injure my body, it exposed a pattern I had been ignoring my entire life. The truth is, the cake wasn't the problem. The problem was how comfortable everyone was watching me be the joke, and how normal that had become. Recovery gave me time to think. Too much time, maybe. But in that stillness, I understood something clearly for the first time: love doesn't require endurance. Family isn't supposed to be survived. If someone can laugh while you're hurting, then minimizing yourself to keep the peace only teaches them that your pain doesn't matter. And once people learn that lesson, they rarely unlearn it. I don't share this story for sympathy. I share it because someone watching this might be sitting with their own version of "it was just a joke." Maybe they're being told they're too sensitive. Maybe everyone else is laughing while they're silently breaking. If that's you, please hear this: your instincts exist for a reason. Your body, your fear, your discomfort are signals, not weaknesses. Speaking up doesn't always look brave in the moment. Sometimes it looks messy. Sometimes it costs relationships. Sometimes it makes you the villain in someone else's story. But silence costs more. It costs safety. It costs self-trust. And sometimes, it costs far more than anyone realizes until it's almost too late. Walking away from my sister wasn't easy. Creating distance from my family hurt more than I expected. But peace isn't loud, and healing isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's choosing yourself when no one else will. It's learning that you don't owe access to people who treat your pain like entertainment. If my story does anything, I hope it reminds you that you're allowed to take yourself seriously. You're allowed to say that hurt. You're allowed to leave. And you're allowed to protect yourself, even if the people hurting you share your last name. Sometimes, surviving isn't about being strong. Sometimes, it's about finally refusing to laugh along.